and recognizing that I'm not unusual. Lots of, marriages fell apart during the pandemic. Lots of people left jobs, whatever. I seem to have made all the big changes all at the same time. But talking about it allows other people to feel like their story isn't so weird and they don't have to be ashamed of it.
And I'm so grateful that you made time today, Mike, because as I was saying before, I've rescheduled on you once and I'm late once. So very flexible of you.
I'm very, very flexible.
I do appreciate that. Thank you for that. And I did have to do a bit of research about you. So I know let me tell you what I found out. I know you from one context, which is writing the solo show performance level 1 course.
Yes.
And then I did look up your website and I did sort of know you had this job and I realized that you're a professor. And then I thought, well, how am I going to introduce Mike? Because that's not how I know him. But then I was like, how do I talk about him as a performer? Do I talk about him as a professor?
I am an enigma wrapped in a mystery. Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's part of my story is I actually gave up being a professor last year and when I moved to Toronto. So yeah, I don't know how to introduce me. That's a good question. I mean, as you know, the Mike Michael thing is weighs heavily on my mind. I'm fine with just the solo show performance guy, classmate, friend.
Classmate.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so as I ask questions or as we talk about things, you feel free to put your professor hat on or your performer hat on, whatever feels comfortable. Sure. And we're going to have to put a pin in that Mike Michael story now that you've brought it up. So we'll come back to that one. But maybe I'll just start by asking you, when did you first begin performing?
Really seriously in high school. It's interesting. So during the pandemic, I reconnected with a lot of people that I know from high school. And I started reflecting on kind of who I was in high school and recognized that I didn't actually feel comfortable in my own skin until about grade 12. Now, I did high school in Ontario, and at the time we had grade 13. So I had an extra year to kind of get settled. I was, looking back on it, I don't know if I was a popular person or what, but I could perform, and that gave me certain social cachet. So yeah, it was high school. I won awards. I'd actually considered doing it more full time. And then I went off to university and that just kind of fell by the wayside, but it's always something that I've kept up. Like, I would like to do that. And I dabbled in playwriting every once in a while, but yeah, that's where it kind of hit for the first time in high school.
And so you came back to it in the pandemic.
Yeah.
And
a little bit, a little bit. Yeah. I feel like I've always had this creative drive, like writing I've kind of gotten back into during the pandemic, just as I kind of explore the question of who am I and figuring out how to make sense of this world and where I fit in it.
That is the perfect segue to the Mike Michael story.
The Mike Michael story. Okay, so you've actually heard a little bit more of it than I'll probably be able to share here, but probably a bigger context piece is about, and it's almost about a year ago. But so I guess the process started about 2 years ago. I really started questioning who I was and all this stuff, and that meant the pandemic was the worst 2 years of my life in so many respects, where just everything kind of that I built my life on kind of fell apart. My job, and that was more like I just got burned out and I couldn't do it anymore. I was in academic administration at that point. My marriage fell apart. I decided I didn't want to live in Winnipeg anymore. But it kind of went back to this much more fundamental question of who am I? And before I moved to Winnipeg in 1999, everyone called me Mike, except my grandmother. My grandmother always called me Michael. And when I moved to Winnipeg, for some reason, I don't know if it was because people were getting introduced to me by me handing them forms to get into a PhD program or whatever, they would just read my full name and call me Michael. And about 3 or 4 years ago, my then boss started calling me Mike. And it was this, oh wait, oh, like I don't have a preference. I just find it interesting what people call me. And then, I had the same thing like with students. Do they call me Dr. Boyce? Do they call me like, and I would always say, like, call me whatever you want, which usually meant people calling me hey you or not saying anything. If you give people the option, they don't know what to do with it. So you can call me whatever you want. That's kind of where I've rested these days.
I really enjoy when you tell the story, and I know we don't have the scope to do it now, but the story of you in school at roll call,
First day of kindergarten. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
where your
Did
mother has made an error, a fatal error.
Yes. Yeah, I've kind of all traced it back. I've done years of therapy and kind of thinking reflectively on who I am and how I got to be who I am and all these things. And I remember that story so vividly that on the first day of school, my mother had accidentally put my father's name in on the form when she filled me out. And so I was all ready to put my hand up and say present, as you're supposed to do, because I'm a rule follower. I like people to know that I know what I'm doing. And she says my father's name, and I just froze. And yeah, and it didn't get corrected for like 3 years. First days of class until about grade two. I would have to go through some version of this story again.
It's interesting to me because when I met you and I heard you tell your story, and you tell it really well.
Thank you.
So as somebody who's observing, I listened to you and it was very smooth and it was really funny, and it's well written and well told and well performed. And so if I think about asking you about vulnerability, there's an aspect of it that is, yes, in the context of the story, I can understand, but in the telling of it, I don't see it. So I was curious to know how you would talk about today, how you might talk about vulnerability, not specifically in the context of that story, but in the context of questioning who you are in the world.
There's a lot in that question. I've been thinking a lot about it since we set up this conversation. So vulnerability is something that I very consciously brought into the classroom about 5 or 6 years ago, maybe longer ago. I had a student of mine. He was still a student. I wasn't at the school he was at. Took his life by suicide, and it was very traumatic for me. He chose a very horrific way to do it, and he was the last person in the world I would have thought had these issues. Like he was the class clown. He was a funny guy. He really liked me, so he took a bunch of my classes. And I remember it was right before Thanksgiving, and I had to teach when I found out. And I remember just standing in front of a classroom full of 20-something-year-olds who looked very much like this poor guy who decided to take his own life. And I just remember standing there like weeping, saying, I don't know what to do. I know I can teach, and that is what I'm going to do. And I might not be very good at it. And I just told my class, like, straight out, I am hurting. I don't know how to handle this. And this is one thing I know how to do, and that's teach. And I don't know how reflectively it was done in the following years, but I realized that as an educated cis white dude, I could say things about vulnerability. Like, my position gave me certain protection to say things, and it actually opened up opportunities. Now, in a classroom setting, I always felt you had to be careful. You couldn't say too much. You couldn't be too vulnerable and turn the students into therapists. But there was I think a great lesson to be learned by saying, like, yeah, I didn't get your papers marked this weekend because something came up, and I didn't have capacity to do that, and to give students the freedom to recognize that they don't have to do everything and they can be vulnerable. And then there was something about the pandemic. As much as I hated it for blowing up my life, there was a shared vulnerability in people that was actually very freeing. at least in my circles, people would say, "How are you doing?" And people would say, "Like, I'm really struggling." In an honest way, the social convention is you say, "Fine." And that fine masks all kinds of things, and I feel like we've kind of gone back to that now. We're fine, everybody's fine, everybody's fine. So I've kind of consciously really tried to be honest when people ask me how I'm doing. I'm sure it alienates people. I'm sure people hate it. People avoid me like the plague. But I think there's something that we're losing again by just falling back into that fine. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. 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 I've tried to be really open about, the things that I've gone through. So yeah, vulnerability is actually really important to me.
I might not remember the exact words you used, but I think you said something like the pandemic blew up your life.
Yeah, it exploded my life.
What
Completely exploded my life.
was it? What was it about the pandemic that made so much come into question?
Well, there were a couple of things that kind of all converged at the same time. When we went into lockdown, what was that, March 2021? 20? I don't know, time has no meaning anymore. Whenever that was, when we couldn't leave our homes. I was in Winnipeg, and I think at that point, my ex and I had kind of realized that things weren't working, and had started to talk through that stuff. And it just like, I want to be really clear. Like, this is my version of what happened. She has her own version. We are very good. I was in Winnipeg recently. We had dinner. I think in many ways people have commented that, for people going through this, we've done remarkably well. It wasn't always easy, but recognizing that, like, there are problems. We're seeing things differently. There are versions of things that have happened that we're telling very different stories about. And then you're locked down and you're in the same house. So all of the things that you may have put in place to your life to ignore or repress or whatever, you can't do. I had become, the year or two before that, I'd become the boss at work. So I went from being just a professor to the person who was in charge of the academic unit for the school I taught at. Very, very young to be doing that. So young and inexperienced, and it was fine, and I enjoyed it. But when you're the boss, you suddenly, like, your work colleagues are no longer friendly. And that became tense during the pandemic, when all of these things had to be decided. Do we continue to teach? Do we go virtual? When do we go back to class? Can we go back to class? What resources do we need? And if we're going to teach online? And it was just like so horrible. Like, every decision I made in the pandemic about academic unit and safety and the running of the school just got questioned by everybody. And it felt like all my supports kind of fell apart. So, and then something else happened. My wife left a job where I'd kind of like built a social network, and she left it kind of badly. So I didn't feel like I could be friends with those people. So, like, work sucked, home life sucked. I didn't feel like I had friends. And then just, forgetting, like, who am I? And it got to the point where I didn't even know, I didn't even know people liked me. I didn't know who I was anymore. And I remember, as I'd kind of made the decision, Rachel and I made the decision that we were going to separate. And we did a public post together on Facebook. I'd moved out at that point, but I went over and we sat at now her dining room table, kind of held hands and pushed send at the same time. And then I'd made the decision and kind of worked to get a new job in Toronto. And I was out for dinner with a friend of mine who runs the Winnipeg Folk Festival. And she was so excited that Winnipeg Folk Festival was coming back. She's like, "Are you coming?" And I'm like, "Well, it's funny. I probably won't be here, but also, like, I think I like Folk Festival, but I don't know. Did I go because my wife wanted to go to Folk Festival, or did I love Folk Festival? I don't know. I just don't know." So this whole year, basically since May, has been like rediscovering who I am, what I like. So, that's incredibly vulnerable too. Like, take like TJ and Megan's solo show writing course, and just, meet cool people like you. And that's fun.
So level 0
Level zero.
Mike emerges Phoenix, like.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, a little, lots of stretching and cracking and aches and pains, but yes.
Excellent. Okay, so as the Phoenix spreads his wings,
Mhm.
how would you define your identity today, not by physical or social kinds of characteristics, but in terms of who you see yourself as?
I don't know because I'm still figuring him out. I've learned that I'm I'm a pretty decent guy. Like I hate to say that because I definitely have the like self-deprecating side to my personality, and I've always kind of been that not negative, but like glass half empty, pessimistic type of person. So it feels really weird to like toot my own horn. But like I'm pretty interesting and decent, and I think I'm fun, and people really do seem to like me. It's really weird. I've become since moving back to Ontario, I try to get together with my high school friends. We've gotten together 2 or 3 times now, and somehow I've become the social convener. And like everyone's like, it's so great that you're here and you can like get us together. I'm like, dudes, if I'm your social convener, we are in a lot of trouble because this is not my forte. And I in high school, even though I kind of found my niche in drama, like I had this one ongoing fight with my friend Ryan. He's like, we always invited you out, but you never wanted to come. And I'm like, that's not quite how I remember it, but okay, like like they're so now I'm just out there making plans and doing things, and I've traveled a little bit, and I don't know who I am, but I kind of like them.
As far as writing your solo show,
Mm-hmm.
do you see that as part of your process of discovering a different sense of who you are?
Yes, because it's forcing me to kind of crystallize some of the thoughts that I've had. I think I'm generally a reflective person. I'm introverted, not as introverted as I thought I was before the pandemic. I realized I'm a lot more social than I realized. If you had told me 5 years ago, there's going to be a period of time where you can't leave your house and you just watch TV, sign me up. And then about a week in, I was like, oh, I get a lot of my work done by just popping in people's office and talk. I don't need a lot of social interaction, but I need some. So I think, thinking kind of concretely about the story and figuring out that narrative thread. I've always believed that we're story people. I mean, my PhD is in English literature and film. Narratives kind of appeal to me, the way we tell the story. And, where I'm kind of struggling a little bit with the story now is how do I tell the other parts of the story? And I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I'll worry about the structure later. I'm just going to get the stories out. So I've been working on telling the stories. And then there are some parts where I'm like, is that really my story to tell? I want to be really respectful, but I also want to be honest about the things that happened to me and the reasons I am where I am now. So yeah, kind of working through that. But yes, the solo show thing has really helped a lot. And I had no idea what I was going to write about when I started. And it was through TJ's like introduction, like here's some things to get to know each other. And I started telling like little bits of my story, and people were really fascinated by like, you made all the changes at once. I'm like, oh, maybe this is my show.
Do you think some part of you was drawn to the idea exactly because there's a part of your story that is the past and how
Mm-hmm.
you came to be where you are now? And I actually don't know how much of your show is projected forward in terms of who are you becoming? And
Yeah,
do you think you took on the show in a way to give you a little bit of structure for that projection?
I think so. I think I'm very good at kind of figuring out who I was. Like I'm very good at that kind of looking back. I'm not always good in the moment, like who this is who I am at the moment, but I'm very good about like exposing and pulling away my insecurities and all that stuff from my past. So it's very likely subconsciously that I'm doing that with the show, that I can, look back, which is again part of the what parts of the story do I tell when I talk about, the explosion of the pandemic. Part of it is leaving Winnipeg, where I'd lived for 20 years. Part of it is like leaving academia, which I spent like I was a full professor. I was a 47-year-old full professor, tenured, the whole thing. Like people don't typically leave that. Now they're like, I can't do this anymore. I'll miss teaching at some point. I know that. I'm a very good teacher. I've had feedback from students after I left. But at the moment, especially right now, because all my friends are grading, so it's not even a little bit of me misses that at the moment. So
It is kind of astonishing when you look at it that you left the place you lived,
uh-huh,
the person you were with,
uh-huh.
and your profession. What's left?
I don't know. I still have a lot of movies and a lot of books.
I want to know
But
what you carried with you, what you carried forward from that time that's still with you now.
I don't know if it was so. I never want to be in a position where I don't feel I know who I am anymore, or that I'm compromising. And I want to be really careful to say, like, I made choices, in both work and relationship to not say what I wanted. There was one moment. I've never shared this publicly, so I'm going to share this, but recognizing that this is not maybe part of my story. Just I'm dancing the edge a little bit here. The last day that I lived in the house that I shared, and my wife still lives in that house. I'd packed up my stuff, and I was very, I'm only going to take this, and I took very little with me. I think it was 14 boxes when I packed it up. It was mostly books and DVDs and clothes, and that was pretty much it. And when I walked out of the house in the main floor of the house, the only way you would necessarily know somebody had left is there was one bookshelf with stuff missing on it. And that wasn't again one-sided. That was me deferring to, like, decorating decisions and things like that. But and it was really interesting when I was back for dinner with her a couple weeks ago, the things that she's changed in the house and the things that she's not changed. So that was real. It was like, oh, okay. I don't know where it happened, and I don't know. I don't know. I haven't really thought through all of the pieces on my part of what I did to, like, not assert myself better. I never want to do that again. And, that's been one of those ongoing things. So, like, to have my own space now in Toronto and make decisions about, and even stupid things like decorating. It's not a lot, but it's, it took me a while to hang pictures because I really wanted them to be meaningful. So that's kind of what I took, that lesson of I have a voice. I'm a good person. And even though people may leave me, that's okay. I get by. And now I do the hard things. I have a friend in Edmonton, and she left her partner around the same time. Rachel and I split up. And every once in a while, we just text each other about, leaving the cities we've known for the last little while, leaving partners, and that's not always understood by friends, and starting over again. And, we just connect and say, we did the hard thing. We did the things that people just put up with and don't do anything about. And, it was hard. Absolutely. But that's the other thing I take with me is I can do hard things.
You said something, if I heard you right, you said something that I can relate to, which is when you pack up your stuff and you leave a shared home,
Uh-huh.
and you look back, or you go back in for some reason later on, and you realize, I mean, maybe they decorated something a little bit differently, but it didn't change that much by you having left. And it means that you didn't take space in your home. And I can relate to that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I didn't take space, and I was somebody who, made conscious decisions to take up as little space as possible. I was the vice president academic at the school I taught at, and I felt like my space was very small. 10 years ago, I can't imagine giving away books. Like, and if you looked at my apartment now, you would see lots of books. I have lots of books, but I'm like, I'm never going to teach Old English again. I don't need this. I don't need this stuff anymore. It's not useful to me. And so just being kind of flexible and, recognizing putting my energies into the things that I like as opposed to the things that I should like, or, expectations that people have on me.
Do you see a place for that in your show?
Yeah, I just don't know where. There's so much to put in the show. It's going to be like an 8-hour extravaganza.
Life of Mike.
Nobody wants to see the life of Mike.
So we're almost talking as much about identity as vulnerability, but I do think they're related. And so if I asked you if you consider yourself an artist, what would you say?
I probably would have said no until quite recently, or just like, oh, I've always wanted to be. I would say yes, I am an artist. And I applied for a Canada Council grant to work on a novel that I've been thinking about for years.
Good for you.
I'll hear in August. I don't know if I'll get it, but why not? Because I think I do have artistic leanings. I just don't think I've given myself time and space to explore that.
See, I think I was almost anticipating this. I have to rewind and introduce you as the professor, the performer, the novelist. Yes. Do I see paintbrushes in the background?
No.
I want to get the full picture here.
No, I cannot draw at all. And so I don't imagine visual arts will be much.
And I don't know why I'm really off my game tonight, because now I'm like professor, performer, novelist, and podcaster, because that just hit me. And I thought, oh no, I can't believe I didn't mention that. So there's another feather in your cap.
Yeah. Yeah. The podcast, again, that was something that I started during the pandemic. The first episodes I recorded were in the summer of that lockdown. And it was very consciously a desire to connect with people. So the show is called Geek 4, and it was actually a thing that I used to use when I was awkward, when I was more awkward than I am now. And I would go to parties and didn't know how to handle parties as an introvert. If you ask somebody about the things that they're passionate about, you can talk for half an hour, no problem. It doesn't matter if you know about it or not. I talked to, she's a consent expert advocate, Julie Lalonde, about cars. And she was like, I love Beatles. And I'm like, to me, cars are stereos with wheels, but you're passionate about it. That'll carry the conversation for half an hour, no problem. And so that's been really fun.
Do you feel like you take risks then with these different things that you try, because you don't have training in them? So as you embark on each of these new adventures, you are just throwing your hat in the ring and you're exploring.
Yeah. I was talking with somebody a little while ago, Bonnie Stahoviak. She does a podcast called Teaching in Higher Ed. She has done a weekly episode for almost 10 years, or maybe she's hit 10 years now. And she's somebody, especially when I was teaching, I would listen to her podcast all the time. She was talking to the kind of the best pedagogues in the world about teaching. And I asked her like what she's learned, and she's like, don't be afraid to fail. And I think that that's kind of it. I am very self-deprecating, but I'm also very aware that I can do things. And I, even if it's not as perfect as I would necessarily like, I can make things happen. I had one period during the pandemic where I just felt like everything I touched was working on one level. And then when it failed, I licked my wounds for a while and kind of got back on it and tried again. And yeah, I'm not afraid to take risks.
The fact that you left your partner, you left your job, and you left the city you'd lived for 20 years. If I put myself in that position, I would feel unbelievably vulnerable. And I don't think I would be feeling safe enough to take those kinds of risks and to try so many new things as you have. So do you think that's something, since you were young, did you have that? I mean, you're like an India rubber ball in a way. You're like,
yes, and that's just my shape.
Not true. No. But And actually that I shouldn't say that. That was super facetious. I
No,
didn't mean that at all, because it
no,
sounds
no.
like then you had no impact, but just it's a resilience. It's an incredible resilience, I think.
Yeah, I don't think I always had it. I think it's weird. No matter how successful you are, how many good things you do, at least in my experience, people, it's hard to kind of appreciate that. I remember, having a conversation with high school friends of mine like 10, 15 years ago, like the fears about the high school reunion. And I said, like, I don't know if I want to go because I don't know if I'm successful enough. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, you have a PhD, you're a professor, like you've written a book, like what are you talking about? I'm like, but I don't feel it. Like I don't feel it. And it's taken a long time for me to recognize that, okay, I've done all right. I've done okay. And I mean, that's in part, that's the feeling that allows me to feel that right now, is recognizing that I've done okay. Like I got through the PhD and I, got the book published and I became a professor when I was quite young. And I led a university through a once in 100 year catastrophe. And I did okay. Like did everyone like everything I did? No, absolutely not. But we made it through. And yeah, I might not be the most talented person in the world. I might not be the smartest person in the room, but I'm high enough in all the things that matter that I'm generally confident that I can figure it out.
That's a nice place to be.
It's not bad. It's not bad. Yeah, I'm worthwhile.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mike. That was awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me. This was so much fun.